Bible stories with details you may not have picked up on. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favorites. We are going to be talking about Joseph, the son of Israel. Very brief backstory. Abraham had Isaac. Isaac had Jacob. Jacob was renamed Israel when he physically fought with a pre-incarnation manifestation of Jesus, and God, Jesus, renamed him Israel. Now, prior to being renamed Israel, Israel was madly in love with this girl named Rachel. He wanted to marry her so desperately, but he couldn't afford the bride price. So he goes to the dad and he says, "Hey, I will work for you for 7 years if you allow me to marry her." So the dad agrees. 7 years pass and he's going to marry her, but they do a little swindle thing where they get him so intoxicated and they trick him into marrying Leah, the older sister of Rachel, instead. After this happens, he wakes up the next morning, realizes that he's now married to Leah, and he gets furious. He goes to the dad and starts saying like, "Hey, how could you do this to me? I worked for you for 7 years. We had a deal. 7 years of my life and you gave me the wrong girl. Why would you possibly do that?" So the dad says, "Well, Leah's my oldest and it's our custom to marry off the oldest before the youngest, so I'm not going to marry my youngest daughter to you until my oldest daughter is married. But since now she's married, if you work for me for another 7 years, then I will give you Rachel as well." So Jacob, Israel, agrees to do this. That way he can marry Rachel. So time passes, Jacob ends up marrying Rachel as well. Leah becomes like this super baby cannon where she's just popping out babies. Rachel is not able to have babies. So Rachel starts saying like, "Hey, I want you to sleep with my maid. That way she can be like my surrogate. That way she can have babies on my behalf." So he does that, has babies with the maid. And then eventually Leah stops having babies and she gets the same idea like where, "Oh, I want to give him more kids, sleep with my maid, and that'll give me more kids for you." Eventually, Rachel's womb is opened by God and she is able to have kids of her own. She has two kids. She has Joseph and she has Benjamin. Now, those are Jacob's favorite because they are the sons of the beloved, but more than anything, it's Joseph is the favorite. Time passes, Joseph is 17 years old, and his older brothers, specifically 9 of the older brothers, there's 12 brothers total, 9 of the older brothers absolutely hate him because he is their dad's favorite. So they conspire, they get this plan where they want to unalive Joseph. So they get this plan to do so, and then the oldest brother, Reuben, says like, "Hey, no, let's not do that. Let's just take him and put him in a pit." And Reuben had this idea of like, he's going to go rescue him from the pit. That way, they don't do anything to him. So Reuben's away. The other 9 brothers, the older of the 9 brothers, Benjamin's not involved in this, but the older 9 brothers, they see some slave traders coming through and they decide, "Hey, what we can do instead of unaliving him, we can sell him." So they do just that. They sell him to these Egyptian slave traders, and then he ends up becoming a slave in Egypt. Now, when they're selling him into slavery, they take his robe. Now, his robe was a very special, very colorful one that Jacob had made specifically for his son Joseph, kind of to show that he's the favorite. So they take that, they slaughter an animal, they get all the blood over it, and then they take it to the dad and say, "Hey, is this your son's robe?" And the dad says, "Yes, this is." He sees all the blood and he says, "Surely my son was torn apart by a wild animal. Surely my son is dead." So he mourns for several days, assuming that's the case. But really the case is that Joseph is sold to this family where he's working for this guy named Potiphar. Now, Potiphar is like a wonderful guy. Like, this is best possible case scenario situation where he's going and he's like working for this guy. He's technically a slave to him, but Potiphar is treating Joseph like family. Like, everything he wants, anything he needs, everything is his. Everything is his. But Potiphar's wife is the only thing that Joseph isn't allowed to have, and Joseph doesn't want it. But Potiphar's wife wants Joseph. So she tries to seduce him time after time after time, and he keeps saying, "No, why would I possibly do that? Like, you see everything he's doing for me? He treats me like family. He's not treating me like a slave. I'm not going to sin against him and sin against my God by doing something with you." She doesn't like that. So she keeps trying and trying and trying. And one of the times she's grabbing his garment, so like his shirt essentially. And he runs out of the room to get away from her while she's like trying to force herself on him. He runs away. So she gets very upset. Having his shirt, she starts making the false accusation that he was trying to force intercourse with her to all the guards and then eventually to the husband, and they believe her. It's a false accusation. #MeToo. Anyways, as a result of doing this, Joseph is put in prison. While he's in prison, he meets 2 guys. These 2 guys end up having a dream on the exact same night and ask Joseph to interpret it for them, and he's capable of doing that perfectly. Now, one of them was the chief cupbearer of the Pharaoh, and his dream said that he was going to end up becoming that role again. He was going to end up regaining his power. The other guy had a dream that ended up with him in a unalived situation. That one also came true. So whenever the chief cupbearer gets out of this, he says to Joseph, like, "I'm going to make sure that you get out. I'm going to make sure that I help you because of what you've done for me, what you've told me. I'm going to make sure that they know you're capable of this." He then forgets about that promise completely for 2 years until the Pharaoh has a dream that no one is able to interpret. So He goes and he finds Joseph. Joseph is able to interpret the Pharaoh's dream. Now, the Pharaoh sees 7 very healthy cows and 7 very sick cows. And the very sick cows come and they eat the other cows, but you can't tell that they ate them because they remain very sickly, very skinny, very gross looking. After that, he ends up having a second dream that is almost the same, where he sees a stalk that has 7 really healthy ears of corn. And then he sees another stalk that has 7 really gross ears of corn. And these ones somehow consume these ears of corn. So he doesn't know what that's going to mean. So he asks Joseph, and Joseph says, well, it's very simple. You're going to have 7 years of a famine. You're going to have 7 years of really hardship right after having 7 years of beautiful prosperity. So the 7 healthy cows, that's the 7 years of prosperity, followed by 7 years of famine. So he says, here's what you're going to do, and this is going to be the way that you survive through all of this. You are going to have everyone collect a small portion of their grain every single day, and they're going to put it into the safe. We're going to have all of this stored. That way, whenever that famine comes, we have 7 years of food for everyone in Egypt, and we have enough for people outside of Egypt who need to come buy it from us. As a result of this brilliant plan, the Pharaoh makes Joseph the governor. Like, literally, the only person with more power than Joseph is the Pharaoh himself. He is above all of Egypt. He is so powerful, he is so smart, and he's just genuinely a nice guy. So prosperity comes and goes, famine comes and it stays. So while the famine is going on, his brothers are actually suffering as a result of the famine, and they come to him and say, like, hey, we need to buy some food. Joseph recognizes them, but they don't recognize Joseph. So Joseph is using an interpreter, a translator, to talk to them so that they don't know that he's one of them or that he speaks the same language, anything. So he's hearing everything that they're saying. He's talking about all this stuff, and he's trying to accuse them of being spies. He then says, okay, to prove that you're not spies, I want you to go back and bring your youngest brother to me, because they said that we are 12 brothers. One of them is left at home, and then one of them has passed away. He says, to make sure that you're not lying, I want you to go and I want you to bring back your youngest brother so I know that you're telling the truth. So he gives them grain, and then he actually hides the money that they used to pay for the grain back in their saddle. So they get home and they're panicking, thinking like, oh, this is really bad, we're going to be in trouble. They bring Benjamin back, and then they have the same kind of correlation. They bring Benjamin back, he sees Benjamin, they all have a nice time, they all eat together, but still they don't know that Joseph is their brother. So then Joseph does something super sneaky, and he hides something in Benjamin's saddle, and then he stops them as they're about to leave and accuses them, saying, hey, one of you stole something from me. Who stole it? They say, we didn't steal anything. If any of us has anything that belongs to you, you can take him, you can unalive him, whatever you want to do. So they go searching through all the stuff. They find this golden cup that Joseph had, and it was in the saddle of Benjamin. So they keep him, and they panic, and they go home, and it is awful. And they're telling their dad that they've lost Benjamin, that he was kept, but they're trying to figure out a way to buy it back, to figure it out. So they go back to him again, and Joseph finally unwinds all of this, and he reveals the whole thing, that this was all a ploy, it was all a plot, he was messing with them, which is really kind of cool and really funny. But he reveals to his brothers that he is Joseph, and they start panicking, they start crying, they are scared, and they are just feeling very sorrowful, very regretful for the things that they've done. And Joseph says, you did not send me here, it was God who sent me here ahead of you so that I could preserve your lives. So they have this big family reunion. He ends up saying, hey, go back, get the rest of your family, bring everyone, including dad, bring them all here. I want them to come live here. We are going to make you guys live like kings. It is going to be a beautiful, wonderful thing. Come back. So they do that. Time passes. Israel is able to see his favorite son and even see Joseph's sons as well, which is really cool for him. And then Israel passes away. After he does, the brothers are panicking, thinking like, oh no, this is going to be really bad. Now that dad has died, he is going to take his vengeance out on us. He's going to get revenge for everything we did. So they go to him and they make some stuff up saying like, hey, so before he passed away, he said that you need to forgive us for what we've done. And Joseph says, dude, I already forgave you. What you did, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. This is one of my favorite stories. It just shows that God can use even the worst things as something beneficial and beautiful and wonderful, and we just have to trust God's plan above our own understanding. I hope this made sense to you. Let me know what's next. Follow me on X. God bless.